It's so important for young coaches. You've got to take risks. You've got to take risks. You've got to back yourself. Be prepared to be bold. You can never please everyone. The only person you've got to please, essentially, is yourself and your players. Do not get tired coaching. You're not giving it 100%. The other thing I'd say to young coaches, treat yourself like a business, and that's about getting good experiences, looking for people who are better coaches than you and try to learn from them. How do you get that togetherness, that belonging, which is all the stuff you talk about, mate? How do you get that new culture into a team? At 100 kids, I divided them up into 3 groups, and I did an hour and a half sessions for 3 groups every afternoon, 6 days a week. And made me understand how important it is to coach the fundamentals well.
Welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring. I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Eddie Jones, one of rugby's super coaches, having been at the very top of the global game for over 30 years, winning pretty much every competition he's been involved with. Super Leagues, Top Leagues and World Cups. There is, in the history of the game, very few, probably on one hand, the coaches with his level of success and experience. Eddie was the very first guest on this podcast 50 coaches ago, and he's back today to share his experiences and wisdom. Eddie, welcome back to the podcast.
No, thanks, Ben. I've been listening to a few of them, mate, and really enjoyed them. So you're doing a great job, mate.
Mate, I really appreciate your little texts now and then. When you hear one you like, you drop me a bell. It's lovely. Eddie, what I thought today for you, I think the real value of your experience is in line with the podcast intention, which is the betterment of coaches globally, wherever the coaches are, school, club level, professional level, about how they can actually be the better version of themselves and getting the stuff out of experiences like you've had, which you don't learn on accreditation courses or your levels or things like that. So if I may, I'd love this session to be about your experiences and the little personal nuggets you've picked up through your experiences of coaching along the way. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, we'll give it a go, mate.
Awesome. Righto, mate. Well, from the last interview, I'd like to just ask that question to start with, is you said this on the first one, culture is the way you do things. You've heard it described as the behavior when you're not with people. Do you still stand by that? Have you got any additions to that?
Yeah, the only thing I've been thinking about in that, because it's a really good question, and like I did a little coaching clinic with some Japanese coaches yesterday, and actually the topic we were talking about is how do you develop your culture. And the thing that struck me, you can either do it through the game, so you can create the game that then reflects the behaviours you want, or you can be very purposeful, which most of the New Zealand coaches are about creating that more family environment and being very strong on values. So I think you can do it either way, and you can do it successfully, and obviously you can do it unsuccessfully as well. But I think that's the thing that's probably I'll be thinking about the most, because just with Japan at the moment, we've got quite a dishomogeneous, I don't know whether that's a word, mate.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
We've got a lot of mixture within the team. We've got Tongans who have gone to school in Japan. We've got New Zealand boys. We've got South African boys. We've got Japanese boys, some from good universities, some from poor universities. So it's actually a really strong mix. And what brings them all together is the rugby and playing the rugby. So we've tried to develop some behaviours out of that to then develop a new style of Japan team.
Is it evolving as you're going?
I think so, yeah. I think so. And it evolves around, the game of rugby. You just watched the games last night. The team that works hardest off the ball generally wins the game. If the talent's about even, the team that works harder in crucial moments wins the game. So how do you cultivate those sort of behaviours? Because I think if you get those sort of behaviours on the field, it doesn't necessarily translate to off the field, but I think it gives you a greater chance of getting those behaviours off the field as well.
Has your cultural aspect and approach to it changed over your 30 years at the top level?
No, because it's always a bit of an experiment, mate, I think. I think, sometimes, there's a lot of coaches that they go and they want to develop culture. How do we develop the culture of this team? I've always probably had a view that let's see what evolves out of this. But let's get clear about how we want to play, because that's the one thing we do all together. Let's be clear about how we want to play, engage the players as much as you can, depending on their experience and their age level in that process, and let's see what comes out of that.
Rugby is the thing that brings us together. Use that as your start point to develop your culture.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely worth considering, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you think about, particularly I think with younger players now, and I was talking to a coach the other day, they need to have real clarity about how they want to play. And the clarity is obviously a style to play, but then be able to adapt to the game. And then they want to have a very strong and clear expectation of their roles. And I think that's become even more important in rugby as the generation changes. Yeah, I think players used to be probably more flexible and adaptable before. But you consider now, mate, if you're a 12-year-old kid, we were just talking about your son before we came on. You're a 12-year-old now, you're thinking about making rugby your career. Whereas, when you grew up, it was probably something you thought about. When I grew up, it wasn't. It was just a vacation. So they've got to be a lot more deliberate in terms of becoming a rugby player, and because of that, I think they want a clearer role, and the expectation be clear of what they need to do. And then I think the way you communicate now has to be more individual than group settings. Obviously, team meetings and unit meetings and all those small group meetings are still important, but the individual meetings become far more important for the coaches now. And you've got to become good at them.
Yeah, right. You do. Do you think that more clarity, clearer expectations of roles, if that's in, it allows players to do the other stuff, the cultural side of stuff better, because they're more relaxed and they know they've got to do on field, the bit which brings them together?
I think it frees them up a bit, mate. Yeah. And that's like, what do you want to play to be the best version of themselves? So how do you free them up to do that? So give them, the old idea of their heads are Swiss cheese and how many holes do you fill? Yeah, you want to keep that as clear as possible.
I love it. How do you free a player up to be the best version of themselves? That's like the coaching conundrum, isn't it?
Well, I reckon you've got to find out what's holding them back to start with. Like I tell you, I had a conversation. I won't obviously say the player's name, but one of our young props who you could see didn't like tackling. You always know the props who don't like tackling. They get behind the ruck, right? And they stick up their hand, coach, I'm here. Yeah, but you're not doing it. Yeah. And, so when they get in that position a lot, they don't really like tackling, right? Mm-hmm. So then you got to try to work out why they don't like tackling. Did something happen when they were young? Did a coach go crook at them? Did they have a bad injury when they were young? Were they taught badly? Is it a skill factor? Is it a social factor? Is it a physical factor? So you got to try to find that out for them. Because for every player, you're obviously trying to improve their strengths, get them better at what they're good at. But there's always a part of their game that's holding them back a bit, and so that one-on-one discussion about that area is one of the crucial. And I said to this young prop, I said, definitely the first time anyone's ever said it to him, I said, "Why don't you like tackling?" And he looked at me like I had two heads. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you get in a position where you don't want to tackle all the time." He said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "No, you're right. I don't like tackling." And then we had a discussion about why he didn't like tackling. And something happened when he was a kid, got hit on the head. Coach went crook on him. So he's tried to avoid tackling. And a lot of times they'll go back to experiences they've had in their past. And I'm not trying to be a psychologist here, but I reckon for every player, there's that little sweet spot you got to get to find out what's holding them back.
Every player
And,
has
you know, my era, that sort of thing was done over a beer. Like players used to talk about that over beer after game, and in our era, it used to be after training as well. You know, and that those sort of informal discussions about players' play has definitely decreased. You know, because they don't spend a lot of time talking about rugby now because it's their job. I think that's one of the reasons. Like you've still got the top 10% that are into it all the time. They're watching everything. They're talking about everything. But I reckon the vast majority of players now are less students of the game. They're devoted players and they love the game, but they're less of a student of the game.
I guess too, there's so much more other options these days, isn't it? Just myself
Yeah.
working at a school,
Of
the
course,
options are
mate.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Back in your day, it was rugby or rugby league. That's it. Take your pick.
Yeah, there's no Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, none of that sort of thing. I was watching this bloke the other day, right? He must have been about my age, and he must have spent 10 minutes just flicking through Instagram, just flicking through. So, you know, you can learn at an old age. I might take it up.
Well, that's the next step, isn't it? You're like 65 years old, isn't it? That's the next journey.
The Instagram king.
Instagram Kim, I'd love to see it. Now, mate, you talked about the vocation aspect, that it wasn't something that you were thinking about growing over when you're growing up. But I'm really interested in that, and the coaches that listen to this will be too, is when you look back at the start of your career, you essentially, I'm really intrigued, you gave up a teaching, principling sort of job opportunity, career prospects, and you dove into coaching. You dove into Randwick, and then you went, like, what was your thinking to do that? Not do it, not leave a guaranteed profession and go into one which is a little bit more up in the air in a lot of ways. What was your mindset, and how did you attack that?
It was a conversation I had with the chairman of the school. He was AFL played for Melbourne under one of their most successful periods. A big guy, big tough guy, management consultant, made a lot of money. And I came in, I said, look, the rugby's game professional. I'm thinking about becoming a coach, or if I want to stay in education, I've probably got to do a Masters in Education. He said, if I was you, I'd go and coach. So I think he was giving me the tip that I didn't have much of a future left as a principal, so go to coaching. But, I grew up loving the game, mate. For me, it was a huge part of our life growing up. Yeah, and I got to play in teams that won all the time because I played with the Ellis. So it was so much fun. And then when I got a chance to coach, I coached at Randwick for a year as an amateur. Absolutely loved it, mate. Absolutely loved it. And I always wanted, and I still do, mate, to coach the perfect game. Like, can you get your team to go out there and control it from minute 1 to minute 80 and not make a mistake? Like, how good would that be? How good was that? And I still want to do that, so that's the aim.
What's the closest you've come?
It was probably the semi-final against New Zealand in 2019 World Cup. We had pretty good control of that game all the way through. It was just we gave them one try on our try line, an overthrow, which spoiled it. It could have been close to a perfect game.
And mate, when you started, did you get paid? Like, were you scrimping and saving? Or how did you get the money aspect? Because that's a lot of coaches struggle with. How to give up your full-time job and do that? How did you negotiate that?
Yeah, I was lucky. My wife was very understanding. You need a good partner, mate. I was on a good wage in Australia, probably around 100,000, and I went to Japan for coaching for 50,000. So it was a risk, and I think that's one of the things you got to do. I was speaking to this guy yesterday. He works for Red Bull. And Red Bull they're a fantastic organisation. I don't know, if their drink's good for you or not, but in terms of sport, they've done a lot of good things in football. And as we know, they're starting to get into rugby. And he was saying the big thing they talk about there as a coach or as a high performance is that you got to take risks. And I think it's so important for young coaches. You got to take risks. You got to take risks. You got to back yourself. You got to take risks. And that not only pertains to yourself as a coach, but the way you coach. Be prepared to be bold, take risks, look at how you can improve the game. Don't follow other people. Look to see how you can change the game yourself.
Mm. And what was it? What was the driver to go to take a 50% pay cut to go to Japan of all places? What?
I just wanted to coach. I just wanted to coach full time. I remember, the game went professional in '96. There was 2 jobs in Australia, Queensland, New South Wales. I remember, Glenn Allen and I, good mates, we applied for the New South Wales job. Neither of us had any coaching CV, and we missed out. So there was no jobs in Australia, none. So what do? Go to Japan, get some experience. And I thought I'd done some work with the university team that I went to, and they were terrible, mate. Like the tight head prop would have been 5'7" and weighed 95 kgs. He was the biggest bloke in the team. And I thought this is going to be a good experience, learning to coach kids that aren't very good. You got 100 kids there. You're the only coach. So you don't get better coaching experiences than that, because the only way you get better at coaching, that's the other thing I'd say to all young coaches, is coach. Get any team you can and coach. Get your own team and coach. And the only way you get better is coaching. Make mistakes, coach, and coach every area of the game. Don't become a specialist, coach every area of the game.
Mm. And was Japan just so different, like from Australian coaching? What did you learn from it?
Well, I learned how to organise. I had 100 kids. I divided them up into 3 groups, and I did an hour and a half session for three teams, 3 groups every afternoon, 6 days a week. And made me understand how important it is to coach the fundamentals well. But not in that you certainly have to drill it sometimes, but then put it in the context. Because one of the things that Japanese players, and particularly guys who haven't had a rich environment to grow up in, that if you don't have the context of the skill right, the transfer to the game is very poor. And I see that a lot. I see that a lot in now. There's a phase of coaching going through now that is very non-contextual. That's very organisational. Doesn't really look at how the game is being played, but it's all about this idea of you've got to be super organised, which you do. But you got to be organised to play the game, not to play a perception of the game, which is to be super organised. You know where everyone is. You know where everyone's got to be. The game's not like that. You watch the games last night. Very rarely any of those tries they scored were planned tries. They came off the back of someone doing something good, and then being able to react to that.
When you talked about the phase of things happening, do you think we're in a phase now of quite organised structural rugby? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, I think there's a lot of coaching like that now. I think that because when New Zealand started 1-3-3-1, right, and virtually everyone in the world's copied New Zealand, haven't they? Like if you look at it, in reality, everyone's copied New Zealand. So everyone went to 1-3-3-1. And you can get any team now. You can get blokes off the street here and ask them to play 1-3-3-1, and they can play it in 10 minutes because it's easy, it's simple. And so everyone adopted that sort of style of attack, that whether you call it a pod style of attack. So it became very, very simple to organise. And I think too much time's gone into the organisation of that rather than the skills of the player. Because all that's supposed to do is, like any organisation you've got or any pattern you've got, is to break the defence up and then play with your skills. Play on top with your skills so you don't let the defence recover. And I think there's been too much about the actual pattern or the formation, whatever you want to call it, or the shape, and not enough on the skills. And particularly with younger players now, you want younger players not to be able to play a pattern, but to be able to play the game. And as the game unfolds, take advantage of it.
You see a lot of teams like more worried about getting in the right position than actually looking up and going for it, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's been interesting watching Australia. When they first started up after Joe, they were very much that island sets of 3 attackers, and it just didn't work for them. They struggled to be effective, and now they've gone to this more play. They play off 9 a lot, or they played a little bit more off 10 last night. They play off 9. They try to get little holes in the defence, and then they play quickly off that, and they're becoming a much harder side to beat, and a much better side to watch, I reckon.
Whew. They're playing some good rugby, aren't they?
Yeah, no, really good. Yeah, look at the first 20 minutes yesterday. They played some super rugby, really good rugby. Didn't get anything for it, and unfortunately, particularly now, I reckon that's the other part. I reckon, Ben, that's changed in rugby to a great degree. I reckon teams get disappointed quicker, and I reckon it's in most sports now. If they're not getting what they want, they can go away. Unless you've got great leadership, they can go away a bit quicker. And that's why you tend to get these big momentum swings in games now. And you see it in all games at the moment, not just rugby.
Mm. Yeah, I love it, mate. Talking about big swings, how did you go from university for half-cut salary to then jumping into, after that you got involved with Suntory, got involved with Japan? How did that, mate? What would you suggest for coaches listening? How did you make that jump from low-level coaching gazillion kids to then going, boom, professional rugby? Because that's something coaches are ultimately striving to do. What was the big rocks for you there?
Well, I think a bit of luck, mate, was probably the major thing. But I reckon you just got to coach well, because if you coach well, people hear about you. And your best ambassadors are your players. So if you're coaching well, you're improving players, jobs come up, they talk to people, and you get in the picture, and then you get opportunities. Because I think now in professional rugby coaching, I think if you can get stuck in at a level pretty quickly now, and it's hard to break through. Like I think someone was saying, I was talking to someone the other day, can a community coach ever become a national coach now?
What are your thoughts?
Whereas, I think it's difficult, mate. It'll be very difficult, because once you get in that community level, which is, the best level to start at, you've got to have some success pretty quickly to be then looked at for a professional job. The other thing I did, mate, and only because I loved coaching, I wanted to get better. I remember I coached at Torquay. I had December, January off, and Ewan McKenzie, who we played with a lot, was still playing at the Brumbies. So I went down and spent 2 weeks there, and because I wanted to find out what was going on at professional level. So I spent my own money, 2 weeks there. I didn't have to spend too much on food, because Ewan only used to eat sausage rolls, so we'd go down the pie shop. Like, you think about how the game's changed. He basically lived on sausage rolls and pies. It's one of the most successful tight ends in Australian rugby. And then that ended up, the Brumbies had a vacancy as the development coach, and I got offered that job. And I just signed with Suntory, and I got offered the job as development coach, and I knocked it back. And then it ended up like 6 months later, I got offered the head coach's job. But that was all about because I put myself in a position to be known, inquisitive. You gotta treat yourself like a business, mate. That's the other thing I'd say to young coaches. Treat yourself like a business. So how do you add value to yourself? You've got to spend to add value to yourself, and that's about getting good experiences, looking for people who are better coaches than you, and try to learn from them. And you, in a way, it's an informal networking. But I think don't be one of those people that just network. Be a person who's very, very deliberate about wanting to get better as a coach. So if I wanted to learn about work ethic, right, as a coach, the first bloke I'd go and see now is Craig Bellamy, right? So pick out the coaches that you think are good at certain areas, because every coach is not good at everything. Like, that's the one thing. Work out what you can be good at, make that your strengths, and then other areas you got to tidy up. Go and see people who are good at it.
Yeah, and have you found, just when you're going to those, coaching world and rugby particularly is pretty open to that sort of stuff?
fantastic, mate. I reckon.
Mm.
Yeah, there's very few places in the world that won't let you have a look. Yeah, and that's one of the great attributes of rugby, and we've still got that. That's a bit of the old, the old traditional values, and I think rugby's kept that, and we hope that continues because I think people are really good at sharing.
Yeah. Even if someone like people listening to this that are coaching in a small town place in Texas, in the States, they've really, if you want to go well, you have to reach out and you have to look elsewhere and be brave and have guts, isn't it? To just go.
Yeah. Yeah. We had this bloke when we were in Denver, this bloke from the local Colorado University came in and had a coffee with me. Just wanted to have a chat. And he basically called up didn't know him from Bar of Soap, and said, yeah, mate, come in and we'll have a coffee. He had a coffee and, he had a good chat. And I'm sure maybe he learnt something. I don't know. But you've got to do that as a young coach or as any coach.
Yeah. Yeah, mate, couldn't agree more. And I love that phrase you said about you're just your players are your ambassadors as well. You said earlier, which I loved. But also, like, if you're going into an environment too, then if you leave a really good mark just by being a good person or inquisitive and curious, you're actually leaving a good mark behind you. Like you said, that if things open up, they know you, they've had an experience with you, and there's opportunities potentially in the future.
Yeah. And the other thing on that I'd add, mate, I was lucky enough to be coached by Bob Dwyer, and I remember Bob used to say, always speak to the best players, mate. He said they're the best coaches. And he's so right. So you go to a place like, say you go to Melbourne Storm, you want to speak to Munster, you want to speak to Pappenhausen, and just ask them, what are you thinking? Where's your attention? How did you become a good player? Just, normal questions you can ask players like that because they give you little insights in the greatness.
Yeah.
Like as an example, like I went back, Owen Farrell, don't coach anymore, and he was at racing, and I asked him, I said, mate, when you're in phase attack, what do you look at? He said, well, I try to get an idea of how hard they're folded, right? And simple as that. And I asked one of our Japanese tenors, I said, what do you look at? He said, I look at the backspace, I look at the defence line, I look at the spacing, I look at the attackers around me. I said, where do you find all the time to do that? So he by having that conversation with Owen, it gave me an appreciation of what good players can do. And then because some players will just tell you things they want you to hear, you think they've got to say. In reality, now we've got a chance to coach that player better because now we've got to give him the focus of where he should look at. And that's how you can improve. Those little gems of knowledge are the ones that make a difference to when you're coaching players. And the more you can pick those up, I think Pep used to say, you're just a thief as a coach, you're just stealing ideas from everywhere. And it's so true. You steal ideas from players and it becomes your idea and you can use that to help, and you're only stealing to make players better for themselves.
I love it, mate. I always remember when I chatted to you initially and you said walk the floors in the gym, and I've taken that on board years ago. I just think just walk up and down in the gym when your pro teams and just circulate around. You're not doing it for anything in particular, but I stole that from you, and it's part of my it's so good just to be present and you're not looking to critique anything, just build those things. That was a little piece of Eddie Jones' brilliance, I thought.
Not brilliant, mate.
Oh wow, Matt! I've got a lot of value out of that one. One particular. And mate, so when you coach Suntory, what I'm intrigued because what you've done a lot of in your career is you've actually gone back a lot of times to the places which you were at. Suntory, I know you've had ongoing relationship with Suntory in Japan. What is it that you've done in those times that have lent the organisations wanting to have you back, you reckon, as coaches? Like you've had an amazing journey, but you've always come back to certain spots. What is it you've left behind that makes, them want you back? What do you reckon?
I think when you can add value and bring a certain sort of energy, people want you back. And for Suntory, it's always been about opening their eyes to things greater than Japan. Making sure that they're not setting themselves on standards within Japan, they're setting themselves on standards in the international rugby, and so being able to bring that all the time. They want to get better, so they want people who can open their eyes to do that. And it's always like, to us, it's always been like a family to us. Like, they're really good to our family. So, and it's a family company. It's a really good relationship. Yeah.
It's a lovely company on that, and they have pretty high expectations and standards that are right up there with the best in the world, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because they're going through this period now, mate, where I was talking about it to someone the other day. If you think 10 years ago in Japanese rugby, every player was a university player, and their whole goal was to join the best company they could. Not necessarily to play rugby, but to get a good job. So if you went to Suntory, you can generally work in pretty good cities. You wear a suit, you don't have to cart things around. They were good jobs. Whereas Toyota, you go to Toyota and you could end up on the assembly line. Like, we had a hooker from Honda come to Suntory about 5 years ago, and he was telling me about his day at Honda. Like, he'd spent 4 days making this thing, right? 4 hours, get an hour off, and he'd have another 4 hours where he's just making, and then he'd get out to rugby. And of course he loved training rugby. So he didn't want to stop. Didn't want to stop when he got on the field. Had plenty of energy. But now in Japanese rugby, now players at the ages, like we were talking about with kids at 16, 17, are thinking about being professional players. So they're not thinking about their job; they're thinking about playing rugby. So those teams now have to remodel themselves, because they're not company teams anymore. So the name's still Suntory, but the players who are coming through are now transient workers. They're just there for a period of time, 3 or 4 years. So how do you get that togetherness, that belonging, which is all the stuff you talk about, mate? How do you get that new culture into a team? And I think some teams have done it pretty well. Like, I think Toshiba, because they had financial problems, found a way to be a new team. And Suntory at the moment is struggling to do that a little bit. As you know, probably Toyota is struggling a little bit. And there's a few teams I think are going through that, which is a great culture story.
It's actually interesting, Eddie, because you talk about that's the wider societal culture has changed.
Yeah.
So, of course, if that's changing, then the way you coach the stuff has got to be changing as well.
Yeah.
Whatever you're coaching, whatever sport.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right.
Yeah, and you would have seen it multiple times over your enormous career that there is societal and generational shifts which do affect you as a coach, right?
Yeah, well, I think probably the standout for me was in the English Premier League. Like, you had the iconic coaches, Ferguson, Wegener. They were all like serious, hard men. Ferguson more working class, Wegener more academic, but they were, and they set themselves apart from the team a little bit. They stood above the team a little bit. Whereas the new breed of coaches, like your Peps, your Klopp, like you can see they're emotionally engaged with their teams. They ride the emotion as much as their team. You see them, they come off the field, they're hugging and they're kissing. And I reckon it sums up a little bit how coaching's gone. You don't have to be like that to be successful now, but you've got to understand that the emotion of teams now is far different than it was before.
Are you delivering more hugs post-game, Eddie, than you once?
No, I'm not a hugger, mate. Never been a hugger. The only thing I hug's my dog. I'm not a hugger. But the difference, Ben, in all seriousness, now players, 30 minutes after a game, you don't know whether they've won or lost.
Are you noticing that?
And I reckon that's around the world, everywhere now. They're very, very different, because they let go. They're very emotional for a period of time, and then they let go of it quickly. And you just think again how society is, how quickly people move on to things. You know, the website they're on things for 19 seconds average, so they're moving quickly now. And I think that's whereas you used to have teams, you know, in some teams they'd scull and they'd be dirty for 2 days. I think that's gone to a large degree now, and it's much more. You move on to what's next.
And that's probably important to remember as a coach, that just because someone's laughing 30 minutes after a loss doesn't mean they don't care or anything, right?
Exactly, mate. Exactly, and that's what you got to be careful of. And it's even more so when you get presidents and chairmen, you know, who are from a different generation, or they might be from the same generation as you, but they're more detached from the team. So they're still thinking about what it was like 20 or 30 years ago, and they see the players and they think, how can they be like that? It doesn't mean they care less. You know, it doesn't mean they care less. They're just different in the way they process their feelings.
Yeah, that's a big piece, Eddie. That's a big piece. Now, I'm pretty keen to know how you process this part of you as your upbringing, because after Suntory in Japan, you went to the Brumbies, and you had a very successful time there in the end. But at the start, it wasn't. At the start, your first season, they finished 10th, and there's a quote by you that said you're way out of your depth. How did you, like, from a coaching perspective, how did you deal with it? Like, you've come back, you're in a high-profile role, and you feel a little bit lost or unsure, and then you guts it through, and then you end up having some of the most successful times of Brumby history, ultimately winning the Super Rugby title in 2001, first ever non-New Zealand team. How'd you get through the yucky bit at the start where it didn't go well?
Well, it was when I reflect, the first year they'd come second the previous year, so they had a good team. So I didn't change much for about 10 weeks. So I let things run, but you know, we had a Troy Coker who was 35 at 8, David Knox at 35 at 10. You know, a good team that was aging. So, and sometimes just 1 year can make a difference for those sort of teams. And also there was a big change in how the breakdown was refereed. Like previously in the early years of Super Rugby, it was like play the ball in rugby league. You know, there was no contest. You get one over the balls like sevens. And then the Crusaders, who did badly in the first couple of years of Super Rugby, found a way to stuff the ruck up, you know, and it became much more contestable. And we couldn't cope with that because we didn't have it wasn't a hard training regime. It was quite a not soft, but average training regime. And we didn't have great athletes. We had some good rugby players. We didn't have great athletes. So I let it go. And then about week 11, I think it was, I remember I went in and I said, right, we're going to change here, boys, now. This is what we're going to do from here on in. And so we used the end of the season as the preseason for the next season. So I was able to sort of accept that I didn't coach well enough, and then be very deliberate about how we needed to change and had a really strong view. And then within that, so the strength and conditioning, we made a huge change. But the other major change, we worked out, right, how are we going to beat these Kiwi teams? You know, they were athletically better than us. So with a number of players, Rod Kafer, George Gregan, Larkham, you know, some of the greats of the game, we sat down and came up with this, you know, I'm contradicting myself here, this structured system of attack, this three-phase structured system. And we were the most structured team. And we were able to become the best team in Super Rugby through that. And the players loved it, mate. The players loved it. We trained hard. But then by the end, by that fourth year, we had a very, very regimented training system. We were fit. We were organised. We had talent. And the players loved it. And they had fun, mate. They were all in Canberra together. Like they could be a bit naughty in those days, and they were. So they enjoyed their rugby. It was a really good feeling, that team. And the biggest disappointment I probably had in my rugby career was that I didn't stay there. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, well, I reckon we could have won 3 or 4, and could have challenged the Crusaders' supremacy in Super Rugby. But you get offered the Wallaby job, you can't knock it back.
No, you can't. What would you say to coaches that are going through that themselves, Eddie? Like it's a tough thing to take, right? Like you feel like it's all on you sometimes. But what would you say to coaches about having that really strong view and be saying this is the way forward? And obviously there's some innovation in there, which you're not 100% sure how it's going to go. How do you stay so strong on your views as a coach? Do you just say,
well, I think, no. You've got to have a belief within yourself, and I think your knowledge of a game is important. That you see enough to say, right, this can work, but it's going to take some time. This can work, and you've got to engage the senior players. You've got to engage the senior players, and they've got to be part of it.
Yes,
you've got to be part of it.
You've got to get that buy-in. That's a massive part of any strong view. You've got to get those guys and girls on board, right?
Yeah. Like we used to have meetings on Monday night. They'd go from maybe 7 till 10 o'clock, and we'd be discussing the game plan, every bit of the game plan, and everything would be challenged. Like nothing would go unturned over. We'd look at everything, and the players were 100% committed to it. They'd 100% commit to that game plan and buy in it. I remember we played might have been 99. We played Auckland, right? We needed to win to make the semi-finals, and we played Auckland, and we had this 11 pattern. So we play open side, come back down to short. So open side, halftime we're getting beaten 16-0, right? This old story at Eden Park, you go there with great plans and come back with your pants down. And we ended up beating them 2016. It was unbelievable. And I think 3 of the four tries we scored came from the 11 pattern. And that was because the players, this wasn't my game plan, this was our game plan. So when it wasn't working at halftime, we all decided to stick at it, and it came through. And I think that's when you've got the players in the right area, when they really buy into it and they own it and they keep doing it.
Yeah, that's the goal, isn't it? Then you can, because you're writing it together. If you're winning and losing together, right? And ultimately, it comes back to that point about your players are your ambassadors. If whomever is talking to players, they feel like it's theirs because you've communicated with them. Mate, have you ever felt like any of this has ever come unstuck for you? Have you had any bits where you've gone, I've done that poorly, and or what I'm really interested about this aspect is how you weather like mistakes, because it can end some coaches and it can put them off continuing and pursuing a career in coaching. Have you had any where you've gone and advice for players that make mistakes and get it wrong on that side of things? How to get through it?
I've had 2 periods, mate. Post Wallabies in 2005 up to 2007. I didn't coach well. And I felt a bit lost in the game. I can remember thinking, it was going through that huge change to a high kicking game. Remember, the 2007 World Cup, there was up to 90 kicks a game. And I didn't feel like I could coach that area very well. And I was almost trying to guess how to play, because I intrinsically I like to play a ball in hand game, right? Yep. And I felt I didn't coach well enough in that area. And the big thing that saved me, mate, was working with South Africa in 2007 and getting an understanding of the kicking game. Like, again, the best coach I ever had in kicking was Fareed Dupree, learning about how to play a kicking game, and then how to play a game off that kicking game, which South Africa are doing brilliantly now. It's interesting, South Africa have basically gone back to their game plan of 2007 now. I watch them now. I think they look like 2007. High balls, win the high ball, play quickly, and then when you're in the opposition, play hard and flat at the line. And they're doing it brilliantly. So I went through that period, and then the other period was the difficult period I really found in my coaching was trying to change England from a kicking team to a more all-court team, and I wasn't able to do that very well. Yeah, I didn't do that well. And then I went to Australia on the back of that, and I wanted to open Australia right up. Yeah, I wanted to get back to playing a bit like they're playing now. But I was foolish. In the end, I was foolish because I tried to do too much in too short a time. But again, I'd rather take those risks, mate. I'd rather have that, as a mark against me than not having done it.
Do you think that's your advice to coaches around this sort of stuff? Is just, you got to take risk, as you said earlier. Back yourself, the way you coach, be yourself. That's the premise that you keep coming back to, isn't it?
Yeah, and then if it fails, just move on and don't care what people say. Like, don't care what people say. That's the thing, because you can never please everyone. You can never please everyone. The only person you got to please essentially is yourself and your players.
Mm. How do you stay true to that? Because it's very easy to say, right? And I know you've had an upbringing which has made you strong in this area, but what do you think would be any good practices for coaches to weather these storms better, not care what people think?
I think if I was in a normal situation, like I've probably had a bit of an abnormal background, because the life that my parents had was pretty tough, so I saw my mother never hold a grudge against anyone. So I think that's probably allowed me to stay like that. So I don't care if someone says something, I just move on, just let it go. But if I was a young coach now, I'd say find yourself one or two good mentors and continually talk to them about where you're at. Like, I know even in the latter years, I use a guy called Neil Craig, which I think, did you end up speaking to him?
No, I didn't actually.
No, and he'd be great to speak to, mate. And he was wonderful support, mate, for 7 years at England. Just every morning we'd have coffee and just chat about the day. What's he seen? How could I have done things better the day before? What have we got to get right today? And just having someone like that either with you at the team or outside the team, I think, is the most important thing. And they're the person you listen to. You trust them. They got your welfare at their heart. Because if you listen to, I see a lot of coaches, they listen to a lot of people. They're like pin cushions, mate. He says this, so they press him there and he turns into that shape, and he goes to someone else and he's listening. They go to too many people. Just have one or two people. Keep your advice group very skinny, very skinny.
Yeah, because you'll go in all sorts of different directions. You'll keep chopping and changing.
Yeah.
Keep your advice group super skinny.
Yeah.
What would you say to coaches without the resources to have someone in every day? What would you suggest they look at? Amateur coaches.
Well, just if you're coaching at a club, get the oldest coach there. If he's a good bloke, if he's not a good bloke, brush him. If it's a good bloke, say, can you help me a little bit? Once a week, let's catch up for a coffee, and just do it like that.
Once a week,
like everyone can afford a cup of coffee. Maybe not in Sydney now. What are they? $5 a cup now.
Well, it depends what you want to get with that. If you want to go oat milk, it's just add on. Far out. That's right, and that aspect of the good bloke aspect to that is a massive piece, isn't it? Too, like you've got to be able to resonate and get on with someone and have that personal connection too, right?
Yeah. And I reckon that's the other thing in recruiting coaches. Like the big thing about recruiting coaches, select character ahead of cover drive, as Justin Langer used to say.
Select coaches.
Character over cover drive, mate. Pick their character rather than their knowledge or their skill expertise, because the character will come through, and if they're a good character, they'll learn. Don't get too obsessed with having people who are really skillful, really knowledgeable. Pick good characters.
Yeah, gee.
You just think, I told you how much I admired listening to Mike Cron, how good a bloke he is. Yeah. Like, he's really a good guy.
Yeah,
You
he's
know,
tops.
and you can see even the way he's talking about Australia now, how much he's given to them. And he's coaching the arch rivals, you know, and he's just a good coach. You know, they're the sort of people you want in your coaching staff.
Yeah. Yeah. Mate, I think that's massive, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
a really big one. So, mate, as we sort of come to the end of this, Eddie, I'd love to know if you're in the shoes of an amateur coach these days, 10, 15, 20 years behind where you are now, what would be one piece of advice you'd give them, like right off the bat, if they're wanting to go as high as they can? What sort of advice would you give them from your experience in the game?
Right. So have a picture in your head of, you know, you take your child to school on the first day, right? And there's 3 teachers standing at the gate. There's one teacher with kids around them talking to them. There's another teacher standing there like that, and there's another teacher on his phone, right? You want to be, you as a coach, you want to end up that coach who players want to come to. So how can you be the best version of yourself? Work out what you're good at, work out what you're really good at. Don't try to be someone else. Don't try to copy someone else. Work out what you can be good at. Work out how you can inspire players, how you can light their eyes up. So when they come to see you, you light their eyes up. And you can do that through a number of ways. Work out your coaching methodology, work out your strengths, work out your coaching methodologies, and then just go 100%. Go 100%. And every day's like the best day coaching you ever had.
Mate, that phrase, how to inspire, how to light players' eyes up. That's such a creative, out there piece, isn't it? But like, there's so many different. That's the art of this thing, isn't it? How to do that.
Yeah, but it's so true, mate. You go to any training session. I remember the great Australian cricket captain came down to our Wallaby session, and he said, "Oh no, you're going all right." I said, "How can you tell? You don't know anything about rugby." He said, "You go to any team, and if you can hear the noise and the engagement of the players, you know you got the team going." And that's a very simple rule, and that's what the coach has got to set the environment to get those players engaged, wanting to be there, wanting to train.
Love it, mate. It didn't go 100%.
Go 100% every day, mate. Don't leave anything.
Do you get exhausted at the end of days by going, like, do you come home sometimes? Because your work ethic is amazing. How do you get tired from
I
going
definitely
home?
get tired, mate. Definitely get tired. Yeah. And so then you've just got to have a routine to get yourself right. Like, it's just like being a player, you know. If you're not getting tired coaching, you're not giving it 100%. You know, and sometimes you come off in your head's like so full of ideas or shit that wasn't good or whatever it was. And sometimes it'll be a physical tiredness, but you've got to work out a way to get yourself right.
Yeah. And what do you do for that?
Oh, I have a routine in the morning, like that has worked pretty well for me. I get up pretty early, have an hour's work. Like I try to get the day done before I start coaching. So I get all the organisation, all the notes done. So then I go and have a gym session. Then I have a steam bath or a sauna. So I'm ready to start with the team about 7 o'clock. And then from there on in, I can give everything to the team. I don't have to worry about anything else.
So just on the time scale of that, Eddie, you're getting up at 4:30, working until 5:30?
Yeah, something like that.
And then 5:30 to 6:30 doing a gym?
Yeah. And then do it, mate.
What time's bedtime?
When I'm at home, my wife loves staying up late, mate. She's Japanese. She doesn't go to bed till 2, so it's about midnight. If I'm in camp, it's a little bit earlier, mate.
Mate, that's a big session, isn't it? Going to bed at midnight and getting up at 4:30 straight into it. Yeah.
Tired at home, mate.
Far out. Righto, Eddie, the last question, mate, which I didn't ask you the first time round on the first episode of this podcast, but I'm really interested to know this one because we've asked a lot of people. It's this. What is one thing you believe about rugby that you reckon all your peers would potentially disagree with?
I reckon we've absolutely stuffed up technology in rugby, mate. You know, we can't decide whether we want to use technology or we want to use it part-time. I was watching US Open, right? They've got rid of all the linesmen now. They just got central umpire, Hawk's Eye does everything else. And it runs beautifully. And the game's suited to that, right? The game's suited to that. In rugby, we don't know what we want the referee to do. We don't know what we want the TMA to do. We've got to be really clear about, right, technology, as in most parts of life, is accelerates things. How can we accelerate decision-making in rugby? So the two major areas, and I know Steve Hansen thinks the same thing, make it goal line decisions. Like, the only time a team can come in is goal line decisions, 3 phases before a try score. If there's anything in there that's stopping a B try, come in. And for red card offences. Otherwise, let the referee do it. Like, our game is an imperfect game. So we can't use technology to try to make it perfect, because we end up with this mismatch of stoppages in games. Are we checking this or not checking this? And we got things that are checked and other things that aren't checked. And I think it's causing a lot of frustration in coaches, massive at international level. I've spoken to probably 3 or 4 coaches over the last couple of weeks, and they're all unhappy with what's going on. And I reckon we've just got to become really clear. Let's use technology, yes, to get our try scoring right and for red card offences. And it might be something else. And then for the rest, let the referee do it. And if he's not good enough, then the referee gets sacked and you get better referees. Like coaches get sacked, like players get sacked. They should all get sacked if they don't do their job.
Love it, mate. You would be standing up and tearing the house down on this when they have those referee reviews, wouldn't you?
No, I try to keep out of it, mate. I still get too angry. Shit. We had a situation against Fiji, right, in the PNC final. So they get 2 props in bin. So now they're down, they uncontested scrum, so you have to take one more off the field. So for 6 minutes, they got an extra man on the field. We're complaining on the sideline. There's a match commissioner, there's a TMO, there's a TMO for the TMO, and they still can't get it right. Can you believe it? Imagine if that was happened to South Africa. Imagine. That's why I need to go on Instagram, mate. I need to take up Russie's Instagram. Imagine he'd be spraying everyone and probably have the game replayed. It's because it's Japan, it gets brushed underneath the carpet.
Oh, mate, I love it. I can only imagine what those rooms would be like. Mate, I think a lot of people would agree with you, particularly spectators of the games would absolutely agree with that comment, though, on that the technology has done too much probably in that refereeing side of things. Where the technology can be really good, though, right, is the coaching side, the stuff you're doing on field, using it that way, right? But that bigger piece, trying to make a perfect game from an imperfect game, is always going to be tough. Eddie,
and that point about Mike Cron made about your iPhone's one of your greatest coaching accessories now, because you can give players feedback all the time now, immediate feedback. Most teams have got 2 coaches, so one coach is going to have his iPhone filming. If you haven't got staff, particularly for amateur coaches, so you can feed back to the players all the time, because if they can see what they're doing well, then it reinforces that behaviour. If they can see what they're not doing well, it allows them to correct it. I reckon that's one of the most brilliant.
Yeah, Mike made a really good point in that podcast. He talked about just showing the clip back to someone and they go, well, how do you rate yourself? And they go, probably 50. Well, let's try and get it to 80.
100.
And you didn't have to say anything coaching-wise. They knew because they saw it. I love it.
Economy of words, mate. Massive income.
Eddie, before we go, mate, I'd just like to sum up my 3 points from this interview. I've got lots, mate, but what I'd like to do is just the 3 big ones I got for coaches that are aspiring to be coaches, lessons and little tidbits from you. Number 1 for young coaches is you've got to take risk. Back yourself, back the way you coach, be yourself, think for yourself. Don't necessarily copy everything everyone else does, just go for it. Absolutely go for it, whether that means go out and find someone to inspire you, go to somewhere where someone is good and you're taking all that lessons. That's the way you got to do it if you want to aspire to be a coach. Number 2 is be curious, but keep your advice group super skinny. I love that phrase. I think otherwise, as you said, you'll become a pincushion, plucked in lots of different directions. You've just got to ultimately back yourself in the way you want to do it and keep that really small, 1 or 2 good people to hear their advice. And number 3 is this lovely summation of this. Work out what you're good at and your methodology. Then work out how to inspire, and you use the phrase light players' eyes up, and then go 100% up every day. And the analogy you gave was 3 teachers at a school gate. Which one do you want to be? The one that the kids are all flocking to, the ones with their arms crossed, or the ones on their phone? I think we would all want to be that one that the kids are flocking to. Eddie Jones, what an absolute pleasure, as it always is, to have a cup of coffee and a yarn with you. Best of luck for all the rugby journeys that you're on. And I imagine you're going to go for another 30 years, am I correct?
Don't know about that, mate. We'll see. At least 2 years anyway. Keep in touch, mate. Good man.